All right, I'm going to open up the room now.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the SSBG training webinar for the fiscal year 2025 intended use plan and pre-expenditure reports. Today's session will include a variety of topics, and I wanted to share that we are recording the session, which will be available for you after we conclude today. We're going to get started with some team introductions in just a moment. And then we will provide an overview of our Office of Community Services, followed by some information around our program spending guidelines, then an overview of the intended use plan and pre-expenditure reports, and a demo of how those reports can be submitted, followed by a closing with some question and answer time. Throughout today's webinar, please feel free to include your questions and comments in the chat, and we will be happy to come to those at the end of the session. And again, the webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available to you on the portal after we conclude today. So we're looking forward to a lively discussion. I would love to hand it at this point over to Sharice Johnson. Sharice?
Thank you, Beth. And I want to say good afternoon to SSBG state and territory grant recipients. I'm Sharice Johnson, the Division Director for the Division of Social Services, and I serve as the Acting Director for SSBG and the Consolidated Block Grant. I am so proud and so pleased to be a part of this network and look forward to learning more about the states and the territories and the wonderful work you're doing to carry out the functions of SSBG. On behalf of the Office of Community Services under the leadership of Dr. Howard, we're here to support you. We're here to provide you with the best information possible for you to be successful in the state to meet the needs across your states. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it back over to Beth, but I want to say thank you. I'll be on the entire call, and I look forward to learning more and hearing more from you in the many years and months ahead. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Sharice. My name is Beth Plewa, and I am the new operations branch chief for SSBG. And I am delighted to be I'm delighted to have joined OCS and SSBG and to be joined by some of my colleagues who will be presenting today, as well as others who will be available for Q&A both now and down the road. So at this point, I would like to hand it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Beth. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Wong, and I will be presenting today as a program specialist for Regions 5 and 9. I will turn it over now to my colleague, Ollie.
Hello, thank you, Hannah. My name is Ollie Richards. I am the program specialist for Regions 6 and 10. We have other additional staff who will not be presenting today, but are available if you need them. That is Josetta Alexander, a senior program specialist, Regions 1, 3, and 8. Jamia Furbush, program specialist, Regions 2, 4, and 7. Carlos Torres, program specialist for Regions 2 and 4. Josiah Stanton Brooks, program specialist for Regions 1, 6, and 7. The Office of Community Service, OCS, partners with states, tribes, territories, and nonprofit and community-based organizations to reduce the causes and consequences of poverty, increase opportunity and economic security of individuals and families, and revitalize communities. Our social services and community development programs work in a variety of ways to improve the lives of many. OCS-funded programs are vital in addressing persistent poverty and pervasive disparities and inequities. To achieve our vision, OCS has established overarching priorities. These priorities are to administer high-quality programs that reach those most in need, to lift up voices from the field, implement cross-cutting initiatives, amplify connections to administer priorities, to ensure our goals are achieved across programs. The Divisions of Social Services administers two programs. SSBG and CBG are programs which share the same reporting. The SSBG has 57 grant recipients, which include 50 states, the Districts of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the Territories of Guam, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. The Consolidated Block Grant, CBG, programs include Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP, Child Welfare Grants, Community Service Block Grants, Children's Justice Grant, Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Disabilities, Family Violence Prevention Grants, Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act grants, among others. I will now turn it over to Hannah.
Thanks so much, Ali. So I will provide a quick overview of the purpose of the Social Services Block Grant. SSBG aims to support social services directed toward a set of goals that we refer to as the 5 statutory goals. These are achieving or maintaining economic self-support, achieving or maintaining self-sufficiency, preventing or remedying neglect, abuse, or exploitation, preventing or reducing inappropriate institutional care, and securing referral or admission for institutional care when appropriate. All allowable costs under SSBG and the Consolidated Block Grant must address one or more of these statutory goals. SSBG regulations have also established 29 SSBG service categories through which states and territories may report total SSBG expenditures and recipients. OCS has further grouped the 29 SSBG service categories into 8 SSBG high-level service areas, or HLSAs, to facilitate the evaluation and analysis of data related to services and impact. You can see the HLSAs on this slide here. They are child welfare/youth at risk, counseling and support, daycare for children, health and well-being, self-sufficiency, special services for the disabled, vulnerable and elderly adults, and additional support services. SSBG legislation outlines state reporting requirements for grants related to social services. Before a state or territory can spend the payments that they receive, they must report on the intended use of those payments through the intended use plan, or IUP. This includes details about the types of activities to be supported through the grants and the categories or characteristics of the individuals to be served. The deadline this year to submit your fiscal year 2025 IUP and pre-expenditure report is September 1st, 2024, assuming you are following the federal fiscal year calendar. When submitting the IUP, which is a PDF document, each grant recipient must also submit several appendices, which I will discuss on our next slide. The pre-expenditure report, however, is a form that you complete within the SSBG portal itself, and no additional attachments or appendices are required to accompany the pre-expenditure report. So I will very quickly go over the intended use plan. The IUP is intended as a narrative description of the programs and services that grant recipients will fund through SSBG and CBG. This IUP is created annually before the start of each fiscal year and must be updated if any significant changes are made to the intended use of the funds during the fiscal year. For territories utilizing CBG, the IUP should also include a list of grants that will be consolidated, as well as the amounts that will be consolidated under the administration of SSBG. The IUP is required to be made public for the purposes of comment each year. The IUP, as I stated before, is a PDF document that has 4 sections to be completed and uploaded to the SSBG portal. A few additional requirements to consider as you complete your IUP include, please make sure that the IUP contains up-to-date contact information for your state or territory. For states making use of TANF transfer into SSBG, please include your anticipated TANF transfer amount, as well as outlining the eligibility of the services to be funded by TANF transfer. For US territories, please include a list of the funds and grants to be consolidated under CBG. And finally, please include grant recipient definitions of the terms child, adult, and family. As I mentioned earlier, there are several appendices to be included when submitting your IUP. I have made note of the appendices on this slide. Please make sure, or please note that these certifications that are required for Appendix B can be found on the SSBG portal under the Intended Use Plans and Certifications folder. It is important to note here that the IUP and all of its appendices must be uploaded as one file, since the SSBG portal system only allows for one file to be uploaded for each reporting year. You may choose to either combine all the documents into a single PDF file, or you may choose to combine multiple PDFs into a zip file. If you try to upload multiple documents, the system will automatically replace the previously uploaded document. So whether you choose a zip file or a single PDF file, just please remember to combine your IUP and appendices into one upload before uploading it to the SSBG portal. The second half of your SSBG funding application for the fiscal year is the pre-expenditure report. The pre-expenditure report is a companion document to the intended use plan, and it provides the anticipated expenditures and numbers of recipients that correspond to the services described in the IUP. The pre-expenditure report is also created annually, and it is a form that is filled out within the SSBG portal, submitted along with the IUP on or before September 1st, 2024. Together, the IUP and pre-expenditure report effectively comprise your SSBG funding application for your grant recipients program office. And now I will turn it back over to Ollie to go over how the pre-expenditure report is submitted.
Thank you, Hannah. The fourth information memorandum that was published by OCS in June 2007 for SSBG outlined 2 performance measures for SSBG, while maintaining SSBG's flexibility as a block grant. The first performance measure strongly encourages states to limit their administrative costs to no more than 9%, so that resources are primarily directed to services. The second performance measure provides OCS an opportunity to compare planned spending to actual spending. In other words, the expenditure reported via the pre-expenditure report are compared to the expenditures reported in the post-expenditure report. OCS encourages each state to update their pre-expenditure report if any significant changes are made to intended expenditures during the fiscal year. Once you submit your report and changes are needed, please reach out to your program specialist. Here are points for grant recipients to consider when completing IUP and pre-expenditure reports. Service category match. Ensure that the service categories listed in your IUP align with those in your pre-expenditure report, and verify consistencies to avoid discrepancies. Expenditures and recipient alignment. Please confirm that the service categories in the expenditure section of your pre-expenditure report match the recipients mentioned. Consistency between these sections is crucial for accurate reporting. Child-only and adult-only categories. If you have child-only service categories, ensure that they correspond only to child recipients. Similarly, adult-only service categories should have adult recipients exclusively. Please provide explanations if exceptions exist. Include carryover, TANF transfer, and the CBG information. Incorporate details related to carryover funds, temporary assistance for needy families or TANF transfers, and the consolidated block grant, CBG, in your report. These elements contribute to a comprehensive overview. Remember to maintain clarity and accuracy throughout your reports. As a reminder, please remember to include carryover if you reported funds to be carried over in your previous post-expenditure report, or include an explanation to provide clarity if needed. On this slide, we have included essential resources for your convenience. Please feel free to use them as you work on your IUP and pre-expenditure reports. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Zachary of our WRMA technical support team.
Thank you very much. So I'll be walking you through a demo of the submission of your intended use plans and pre-expenditure reports on the website. Let's work on this, and we will select this screen. All right. So here we have arrived. We are on the welcome screen of the SSBGportal.net website. This is a test version. If you do not currently have access to the SSBG website, you can email us at support@ssbgportal.net and CC your program specialist. We will be able to send you back an authorized users form for your grant recipient. Please complete that form with everyone who needs an active account should be current on that form. Anyone listed on that form will be given an active account once approved, and anyone that is not listed on that form, if they currently have an active account, that account will be deactivated since they are no longer listed as an authorized user. On our website, there are a few important places that you can go. We'll start with just the resources section briefly. If you click the resources link and view resources, you'll be able to select the folder that contains things like the forms, user guides, and webinar recordings, as well as a section that contains the IUP form, PDF form for download, and that authorized users form as well. These are example resources. The next most important place is going to be your forms dropdown, where you'll be able to select which report you're going to be submitting. So if we first take a look at our intended use plan, we're going to select what year we're submitting this report for. So we'll select 2025 for this example. And here we're with a screen where we're able to upload one file as our intended use plan submission. An important note is that you are only able to upload one file for your intended use plan submission, but you may have noted that there were several documents mentioned. So ways you can handle that are to, one, combine all of those documents into a single PDF document, making sure that that IUP form is still form fillable, and then submit that as your one file. Or a usual alternative that you can take is to create a zipped file of all of the, a zipped folder of all the files that you need. So for example, you have your intended use plan form, as well as your signed certifications as part of your appendices, and maybe your evidence of public notice and the other required documents. You could take all of these files, place them into a folder, and I'm going to right-click this folder in order to compress it to a zip file. And you'll see it creates this nice zipped up folder for us. So we can submit this as our one file. And so you're able to click this button to go choose this file, but you're also able to drag and drop if you so wish. So here we'll just select this file for our upload and we'll click save. Now for the intended use plan, the save button isn't nearly as important because there's nothing else to be done. You don't actually have to click the save button to begin with. If you're certain of your file upload, you can just go ahead and click the submit button. Okay. So now that we've saved it, we know that our file is in here. We'll go ahead and just hit the submit. Give that a moment. And after we've confirmed our submission with that yes button, it will notify the support team and your status will be updated to review in process, which means that it is now on an OCS program specialist to take a look at those files and either accept them and change the status to accepted, for which you will receive an email notification, or you will receive an email notification of resubmission requested. And then your program specialist will follow up with you directly to let you know what parts of that submission they would like to see explained or changed, or whatever the issue may be. Please let me know if there are any questions in the chat or the Q&A as we go. You're free to go ahead and type those in. I'd be happy to answer them if there are any questions about the intended use plan or zipping up files into folders. Remember that each time you upload a new file, until you actually hit the submit button, it will replace the previous file that you submitted. So you cannot upload documents one at a time. You have to put them all together into one upload. All right. We will go ahead and keep moving forward. So from the forms dropdown, we'll select the pre-expenditure report. Give that a moment to load up. At the top, we'll see the same type of drop-down selector for the year. So we'll go ahead and make sure we select the correct year once that form comes up. There we are. So for our purposes of demonstration, I think the 2024 version is fine here, although I guess we are currently doing the 2025. On your pre-expenditure report, the first thing you'll see is that it's asking you to confirm your state's reporting schedule. So if you report on the federal fiscal year or the state fiscal year, just indicate that for each year for our consistency. And there are 3 tabs to your pre-expenditure report. So the first tab is going to be your definitions tab. And this asks for some information like your state official contact information, your state SSBG contact, and your state CFO contact information. Next, it asks you to provide the definitions for child, adult, and family for the services provided in your state. And finally, we have the assurances section, which asks you to verify some things such that no carryover will extend beyond your 2-year expenditure period. So if you receive funds for FY 2025, then you can expend those in FY 2026, but not in 27. You must expend all of them or return the remainder. The other assurance here is that for your TANF transfer funds, that you are following those explicit rules as defined, such that you are transferring no more than 10% of your TANF block grant, and that the services that are funded by those funds follow the applicable rules for families of a certain size and at the percent of the official poverty line. The final 2 assurances are just saying that your use is expected, as in reflected in the pre-expenditure report on the next page, and that your amounts here will be equal to the amounts you report in your other report for TANF, the ACF 196R financial report, so that those totals should match. The next tab that we have is going to be the start of our kind of grid on our expenditures tab. So here we will see listed the 29 SSBG service categories and several columns in which to enter your expenditures. So the first column is going to be our current year SSBG allocation expenditures. So since this report is for FY 2025 and it's the pre-expenditure report, these will be your anticipated expenditures of your FY 2025 allocation. So where do you plan to expend those funds? For the second column, if you have any funds carried forward from FY 2024 that you're going to be expending in FY 2025, you will report those here in this second column. Any funds that you had carried forward from 2024 that are those SSBG allocation funds. The next 2 columns do the same thing, but with TANF transfer funds. So any funds that you have transferred from your TANF into SSBG and expended, you will report those here in column number 3. And if you have any carried over funds from the previous year of those TANF transfer funds you're expending, you will report those in column 4. Finally, the last column is expenditures of all other federal, state, and local funds. So if you spent $500,000 for adoption services of SSBG funds, but in total, your state may have spent $3.5 million of non-SSBG funds for adoption services. You only need to enter an amount for other federal, state, and local funds for services for which there are actual SSBG or TANF transfer fund expenditures. So if you have 0,000, you can leave this last column blank. You do not need to report those funds if there are no SSBG funds being spent alongside them. Our final columns are to indicate if the provision of services were through a public or private entity or both. and to ensure that you have actually completed that final column, check to make sure that your other federal, state, and local funds are accurately reported in this column here. If we scroll down, we'll see that towards the bottom, we have line 30, which is an automatic totaling line for the sum of expenditures for your services. And then line 31 asks for your administrative costs, which is part of that administrative cost performance measure for 9% or less. And then finally, your final total rows of row 32 and row 33, what we consider your total SSBG expenditures, which is the sum of columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. So those SSBG allocations from this and the previous year and your TANF transfer funds combined are your total SSBG expenditures. Lastly, in row 34, we have the remaining funds to be carried forward into the next fiscal year. There are 2 boxes down here. So the first box is for your SSBG allocation funds for FY 2025. So if you're carrying any of those funds forward into 2026, you'll indicate that here, if that's part of your plan, since this is our pre-expenditure report. And then here, if you have any TANF transfer funds that you are sending forward into the next year, you will indicate that amount here. If you have any funds in line 29 for other services, we will ask that you please list those other services in this box down below. So to the best of your ability, please list out what those other services are that are included in those costs. That's our expenditures tab. Lastly, we have our recipients tab. Here we again have the 29 service categories listed and our several age categories for recipients. So we have children, adults age 59 and younger, adults 60 and older, adults of unknown age. Now here, if we report recipients, we can see that the total adults will total and we'll get a full total here. Our next column is our actual estimated or sampled data. So are these actual counts of recipients? Are they estimated counts or sampled counts? And finally, are these duplicated or unduplicated accounts? So for example, for congregate meals, if the same person shows up over the course of, for one meal, and then for the next meal, if that's 2 people, 2 service, 2 recipients, or 1 recipient. And it depends on the service and how that's defined. Whereas congregate meals, you might count each meal handout as a recipient. For case management or counseling, you might see several contacts as 1 recipient being served through the course of that service. So it's how you define those counts. Some of that information can be included in the next column for the eligibility criteria for this service category. This can be some of the same information from your intended use plan, making sure that those eligibility criteria line up. And there's one more hidden tab that you will not see until you go to save or submit your data. So let's go ahead and click save here. Oh, maybe we'll try for the submit one. We know there are things missing. Aha. So if we go to submit and there are some things missing, for example, we have a lot of required fields on our definitions tab that we did not fill out at all clearly. Everything seems to be fine with our expenditures tab. Please select our state's reporting schedule. Okay. So my example at the moment is not prepared, but if you submit, you will see several either errors in a red box, or you will see a yellow box that has some validation flags or flaws. And what you will see is there will be, perhaps this only appears on the post-expenditure report, I'm sorry. But for those familiar, the post-expenditure report will have an additional tab called validations, where it might ask you to respond and provide those explanations of, you have reported adult recipients for a ostensibly child service category, please provide an explanation of, how those adults were served and it still met the eligibility criteria. That validation in that question will only appear on the post-expenditure report when you go to submit, for example, data for like daycare for adults or children, and you have adults or children in the other category. Some final things to point to here are we have our tutorials button. When you click this, it will open up a new tab to our YouTube playlist of all of our most recent webinars that have been recorded. So once we are able to obtain this webinar recording, we will be posting that and adding it to our YouTube playlist as well. So you'll be able to easily revisit this recording through the website. And then finally, once the data for a year has been totally collected, both pre and post expenditure reports, eventually it will all be posted. You can either download each individual report that you visit that has been, saved at least once. And then at the end of the year, when the full report is released, you are able to visit the dashboard and kind of see the national picture of where all the data lies. So we'll go ahead and see if there are any current questions. Let's see. I see there's 2 in the Q&A. Let's see. Okay, so I have 2 questions. So number 1 is, am I able to show where to find the intended use plans and certifications folder? And so this will be, and unfortunately they're not named the same here, but it will be a type on the resources page. You will clearly see that as one of the indicated folders. Since this is the test website, they haven't been named the same at the moment. But that is where you will find, again, the user guide, as well as the authorized users forms, a blank version of the intended use plan, the 4 certifications that are required. All of those items are available in those resources folders. So the second question that we have is to please explain carryover. So if you list carryover in the most recent 22 to 23 post-expenditure report, how does that affect the 24 to 25 pre-expenditure report? I'm confused on how you are matching fiscal years where there is a gap in the reporting years. So these reports are supposed to just line up with the actual allocations that you are given. So while the fiscal year may run, from 22 to 23 or 23 to 24, 24 to 25, the report is for the singular year. So, the federal fiscal year starts October 1st and ends September 30th. You received FY 2025 allocations and expended those for FY 2025. And so the idea is that you're reporting those funds that you received for that year. And if you don't expend all of those funds, since you have 2 years to do that expense, let's say you only spend half of your FY 2025 allocation funds, you would indicate that remaining total that you're carrying forward to spend in the next year. And then on next year's report, the funds that you report down here should be dispersed throughout column number 2 here, because they are your carried over allocation expenditures from the previous year. So here you say, if this is the, let's say we're filling out the 2025 report as we are, and we carried forward some funds from 2024, we would report those here. Let's say we carried forward, 2,500 funds here and 10,000 funds here. With the goal being that this number that this column totals up to will match line 34 from the previous year's report. If you're able to expend all of your funds within the 2-year period, we should see all of that accounted for. Please let me know if that doesn't answer your question or if there are any other questions.
Thank you, Zach. I'll encourage people to post any questions for Zach at this point in the Q&A. Otherwise, we will move back to the general Q&A at this point. So keep other questions coming as well. I know that with a thing like reporting, it can be the case that a question occurs to you, right after we hop off. So I would also encourage you to contact your Office of Community Services, Social Services Block Grant Program Specialist assigned to your region. Hopefully you've already met that person. And if not, you saw their information at the beginning of this presentation. And if it's a more general question or you have general information that you'd like to know about SSBG, you can also contact our inbox, which is ssbg@acf.hhs.gov. That inbox is monitored constantly by members of our team to ensure that you're getting a timely response. So if your program specialist has a bounce back, let's say, it's pretty rare, but if they have one that says, I'll be out for a week and there is no other person assigned to help out in that time, I can't imagine that actually would happen, because we are really good at assigning backups on our team. But you can always contact the general inbox or refer general questions to that inbox as well. So questions for the SSBG team of program specialists or for Zach and his colleagues at WRMA? Our next question, I think, is a little bit of a compliment, which is, who created the slideshow? It's a very nice presentation. Thank you so much. That was a team effort from the entire SSBG team. And of course, WRMA led you through the portal side of the demo there, but I appreciate that. Other questions or comments? This is one I think I'll direct back to you, Zach, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute. The next question that's popped up: is it possible to find out the annual allocation of funds prior to submitting the pre-expenditure report? Oh, actually, wait, I'm sorry. I think I misread that. I would love to have maybe Hannah come off mute. This is, I think, related to allocations that we would have from Congress directing to the grant recipients. We do receive that information. And how does that process work? Do you recall from last fall, Hannah? And if not, we can look that up and prepare a full response.
I mean, essentially the answer is no, you cannot have information about like the annual allocation of funds for the upcoming fiscal year prior to submitting the pre-expenditure report. That is not information we ourselves have, because the annual allocation of funds for SSBG is determined by Congress, as Beth mentioned. And so you can usually look to the previous year or previous years allocations as a sort of guide, and use that to inform how you fill out and submit the pre-expenditure report. But the actual allocation itself will come like at a later date, and we communicate that to you through our notices of awards and communications like that.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So what I had originally thought was, we will know quarters 2, 3, and 4 amounts based on the first round of the first award that is sent out, but we actually don't know always what the Hill will provide until it is provided. And our reporting requires that that this process take place before the allocations are determined. And of course, a continuing resolution impacts the speed with which we can release the funds as well. So we might end up in a situation where we're in the dark for a little bit longer than normal if Congress does not pass a budget before October 1st, which traditionally, for the last several decades has been the case, that we have at least a short-term continuing resolution. Other questions at this point?
Beth, I just wanted to say that usually those funds are determined by a very intense mathematical equation, considering your population of your state and things like that. So the funds determination is depending on your population and many other things, so it's really hard, but there is the post expenditure webinar that we did a few months ago that's on our website. That explains the math behind it if you did want to try to do the math yourself, but
Thank you for that, Ally. That's great. And thank you, I think it's Paulia for your comment. Patricia asks, with the allotments being awarded incrementally throughout the year, how are we to handle amendments that are due before we know the full amount? So, Hannah, this might be sort of just extrapolating a little bit more from what you just shared, I think, because the continuing resolution can impact the, if the budget were to be received by our team around the end of this fiscal year, beginning of the next fiscal year, then we would be able to submit your Q1 funding to you on a more predictable timeline. But in the last several years, there has been that continuing resolution at the beginning of the federal fiscal year. So there is sometimes accounting adjustments that are made during the year, but your total amount will be can be construed, right, Hannah, from what you just shared. Sharice, were you going to add to that?
Yes. In addition, I think it's important to note, pretty much like Beth said, that once Congress, approves the budget and we get the appropriation, or we're in an interim continuing resolution, is the posture that we're frequently in. And what the federal government does, as well as what we're encouraging you to do, is use the information from the prior year to do a guesstimate of how much the funding will be if there has not been a final budget approved by October 1st of each year. And you use that as a guide. The federal government does the same thing. Often we're instructed by Congress to base our planning for the first quarter of the new year based on prior year funding. And so we're saying the same thing to you, state and territories, based on prior year funding, especially in that first quarter of the new fiscal year, that you will use that as your guide. As funding is released in subsequent installments or in subsequent funding awards, then you'll be better able to get a gauge of how much money you have available. But until Congress has a fortified budget, we just base everything based on the prior year.
And your program specialist can walk you through making adjustments in the portal to your pre-expenditure report and how to reconcile that with your post-expenditure report as well. So there is a period of time built in within our back and forth conversations that we'll have in the months of September until, January and so on to accommodate if we do know more about the congressional budget process and what the impact might be. Please submit any other questions at this time.
I see that there's a question from XM Burke regarding the deadline for submitting revisions to the pre-expenditure reports. Someone on the team may correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not really a hard deadline to the revisions process. Because first of all, after pre-expenditure reports and IUPs are submitted, your program specialist may contact you within the next like few weeks, usually, if there are any outstanding revisions that need to be made before we can approve your application. So grant recipients should just kind of be on the lookout for those kinds of communications from their program specialists. But as for revisions that grant recipients may want to voluntarily make to the pre-expenditure report at a later date, again, there's not really a deadline for those things, but they do need to be communicated with the program specialist so that everyone knows what is going on. Everyone can be on the same page about why this revision is needed and what the implications are, and also so that the program specialist can reopen the pre-expenditure report in the portal itself for the grant recipient to modify. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, Hannah, that was great. I would just add that in the past, the process for the review that Hannah just outlined has been a little bit more complicated than it will be this fall because of staffing changes for the SSBG team over the years. Sometimes there have been years where we have not had the capacity to review within the timeline that has been set for SSBG. So, but this year we are fully staffed up and ready to hopefully conclude our first round of reviews during the month of September, so that you would hear by the end of September, early October at the latest, from your program specialist if there are revisions that we will be requesting at the federal level to your materials that you've submitted. And then it will be perhaps a couple rounds of back and forth until like the end of the calendar year to hopefully lock everything in as final. But you're also encouraged to reach out throughout, especially the month of August, as you're leading up to submitting by September 1st, to ask any questions that you have of your program specialist and start getting those answers in time to submit on time as well. All right, last call for any additional questions. These questions have been fantastic, and I look forward to a really robust summer of conversations back and forth between our team and our grant recipients. And we thank you for your time and attention today. This is not the end of your opportunity to ask questions, as we said, so please jot down our inbox address there for any general questions, and be sure to get in touch with your program specialist if you have any specific ones to your circumstances. But I'll wind us down and say thank you very much to my panelists and to our WRMA colleagues and our IT team, and to everybody who attended. Have a fantastic afternoon. Take care, everyone.